Hey guys, today I'm going to go over setting up the Marvelous Designer 3D model that you've already built to set it up for the GK 3D Viewer to get our models into the 3D rotatable um, thing. Bear with me, I have a cold, so if I have to cough or whatever, just ignore it. um, The first thing you want to do is you probably want to take a look at this document. I'll put it in the thing below, and you can download it and read it. It's a lot of words, and so I apologize for that. But it does kind of explain what's going on for the most part. It gives a lot of good like little tips and stuff in there. I'm going to try to stick to this guide as humanly possible as I can. Um, But in here, I'll also give you some other examples, hopefully some other tips. And I think it's just a lot easier when you can see all of this stuff. Like I said, there's a lot of words, but the process is actually pretty quick. Um, so you can download this, follow along with it, just have it up. Um, and yeah, let's get started. So at this point, you should already have a Marvelous Designer file built out. Um, I do have an example here I'm going to use, and all of the objects are built out into separate areas. This is not necessary. You don't have to export them this way. For this style, I think it was probably a little easier because it has this weird mesh piece that goes over top of everything. So it's probably just easier to export everything separate and then assemble them together in Blender, which is kind of what we're going to do here. So you build your Marvelous Designer file, export everything. If you want, you can set up your UV map there, but we might make changes in Blender, so just keep that in mind. Um, I think it's a good idea to set it up kind of in Marvelous Designer and then edit it if you need to in Blender. If you need a 3/4 sleeve, you can do those as two different objects, or as long as they kind of occupy the same space and don't need any like major edits. If you need to make an entirely separate model for your 3/4 view, that's fine too. Um, so let's take a look at our what we're kind of hoping for here. So I'm going to open up Blender, and this is a file I started working on, and this is kind of like the end result of what you're looking for. Um, this is style, I can't remember, 9646. And essentially, I'm just going to walk through this here and then we'll actually get started building our own. Couple of things to note. If you note this body here is right smack at the center of the axis. Um, normally when it imports, it imports like up here, like pretty high. Um, we have to move all of the parts down so they're in the center, and you kind of have to do that relative to each other to make sure that you don't wind up with things that are disjointed, which is bad. So we'll go over that. And then also, let's just walk through the parts here. We've got area 1, A, B, and C, which are just your simple, um, your regular parts of the leotard or garment or whatever you're making. So they are just, and they're named really simply just 1, A, B, and C, and this is required in order to make the visualizer work. It's just looking for one letter or one number or specific names in order so that it knows what to do with each of these little parts. So we got 1, A, B, and C, which are our uh, you know regular parts. Also, there is a liner. So let me turn these off, and you can actually see the green liner right here. And it is just the green is the liner, and it's just sitting underneath all parts, and it's named just like everything else. You're also gonna have to make sure that gets put on your UV map in order so that it actually gets colored. So on your UV map, you're gonna need 1 ABC, the liner layer, and also this interior layer. You just need a really small spot for that. We'll go over that though too. Um, so we'll turn the liner off, and what we're left here is this interior layer. So if you go into edit mode and you turn on your, sorry, edit mode, I selected first, edit mode, and you turn on your normals, you can see that all the normals are pointing to the inside of this. So we actually don't want to see the outside of the interior layer. We only want to see the inside of the interior layer. Again, something we'll go over when we get ready to make that. And as I turn everything back on here, there's one more layer I want to show you, and that is this embroidery layer, and it's just a literally coating that goes over top. It's just displaced a little bit, and what it does is the embellishments go on here, and then that way they magically look like they're on top of the actual leotard, but then that way they don't have to use the same properties. So if you have, like say area A is Mystique and it's got like a bright shininess to it and it's got the Mystique texture to it. If you apply like an imprint or a jewel to that, you don't want the jewel or imprint to have that same Mystique texture or shine. Um, so this enables it to be its own separate thing so that it doesn't wind up taking on those properties of the layers that are underneath. Um, so that's pretty much it as the example here. So let's get started making our own. First thing you're going to want to do is just make a new file. Make a new general file, and you actually, you wind up, let's load the factory settings. I want to make sure I'm getting the same thing that you do. Okay, so this is what you normally get when you load a Blender file. You got a camera, a cube, a light, the 3D view, so that's totally fine. Just to help set you guys up, I'm going to tell you this. You don't need a light, so you can hit X and delete that. You don't need the cube, obviously, and you actually don't need a camera. Because we're not rendering these out anymore, we don't need to provide those things, and it actually makes it a lot cleaner and a lot nicer to not have them in there. You can leave the collection if you want, or you can make your own collections to kind of organize things. But I usually just delete them and have everything kind of in the open. But it's whatever you need, whatever you want. Also, there's a couple of things I like to work while I'm doing this in the viewport shading mode. And I'm going to also turn on like wireframe and turn down the opacity. And then that's in the viewport overlays where you turn on that option. And then also in this option for the viewport shading options, I like to turn this random. Um, and what random does is when you add objects, it gives them a random coloring. So you can see the differences between all your objects that are in there. It's just a really easy way to highlight that this is this is one thing, this is another thing, and it's just really nice. So, all right. So with that turned on, I'm going to show you if you once you get your scene kind of set the way you want it, you can save that as a default. If you go to File and Defaults, and you set the Save Startup File, and it says Startup File saved there at the bottom. Essentially, when you go to a make a new file, new and general, you get that file. And if you want to go back to the old one, you can go to File, Defaults, and load the factory settings again, and it will bring back the original file. But this way, that way, when you open a new file, you don't have to delete the camera and the collection and set all that stuff up. You can set your other options too, like if you build your own views. Pretty much anything that you do here in Blender is gonna save. So like if I wanted to get rid of that animation keyboard toolbar, I could do that and now save my window again, and then I won't have to worry with that. So you can kind of customize this the way you want. But okay, so let's get to bringing in our models. So to bring in our models, we're going to go to File and go to Import, and we're going to go to this wavefront object and navigate to my folder here. And so we've got all of our objects here. So we're going to start with the You know what, we'll just bring them all in. Bring all the objects in, and then we'll handle them from inside Blender. So import wavefront, and there they are. You got all your objects over here in the scene manager. And if we zoom in here, our Leo is completely pulled in. All the parts are there. It looks like there's some overlapping at the 3 1/4 and full sleeves, but that's not a big deal. So, like I said, we have to move it because it's not on the axis. Um, so, so the first thing you're going to notice here is this little orange dot. Your color might be different depending on how you have your blender set up, but for here, the orange dot is actually representing the center point of what we have selected. Now, the problem with the center point is that we can't tell it to just move it to the world axis because it's already at the world axis. If you see over here in your transform, it's 0, 0, 0. So it thinks it's already in the center, but it's not. And that's because the center point is actually set here in the center and the body is way up here. So we need to move the center point into the body and then move the body down to the center, if that makes any sense. The way I do that to make sure everything kind of stays together where it is I usually try to find the largest or most like the main body part of your leotard. And in this case, that's area B. It's got most of the top and bottom is selected in there. So that's what I'm going to use. So in order to move it, we're going to go to Object with the area selected. We're going to go to Object and Set Origin, and we're going to go set the origin to the geometry. So basically, it's going to move the origin, which is that center point. It's going to move it to the geometry. And there you go. You see the orange dot has moved up right smack into the center of our leotard, and it's good to go there. But that's just area B. Areas C, area D, like all of those still have that center point down there. So now we need to move all of those center points so that they match area B's center point. And in order to do that, we're going to move this 3D cursor, which is this circular thing down here with the plus and minus. We're going to move that to the center point of area B, and then we're going to select everything else, and we're going to make all of their center points at the 3D cursor. So to do that, there's a couple of different ways. You can use the menu up here. It's all in the object menu, or you can use keyboard commands. So Shift S if you hold down Shift S, it'll bring up this menu. And this is pretty much the same as what's in your object menu. It's all about moving the what they call the cursor, which is this 3D cursor down here, or moving your selection. So we want to move the cursor to the selected. Of course, we don't have anything selected, so let's select area B, hit Shift S and hold it down, and then cursor to selected. All right, you can see it brings that 3D cursor right smack up to meet the center point of area B. So then let's just select everything, hit Shift S, and we're going to make, oh, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. We have to do this in the menu. So select everything, go to Object, Set Origin, and now you want, instead of origin to geometry, you want the origin to the 3D cursor. So basically what you just did is you took area A, B, C, D, E, and that fold area, and you made central location to where the 3D cursor is. So everything is now kind of centralized, but we still have to get it down into the center point. So again, easiest way to do that is to hold Shift S again, and you want to move the cursor to the world origin, and there it goes, right back where it needs to, but you see you still got everything up here. So now just select all of your items, Shift S, and move the selection to the cursor. And you want to keep the offset just in case there's still anything that's not centered up. That'll make sure it stays in the same place relatively. So there it is. It's in the center. You can hit the tilde key, hold that down, and go to view selected, and it'll like frame that up for you pretty nice. And there it is. So that was the first step. Usually at this point is where I like to give it a save first. So we're gonna do this in my desktop, and I've got a folder here, and we're gonna go to, what is this, 4938, 4938S. Right, let's save that. Okay, so then that way you don't have to do all this over again if your computer dies or whatnot. So um, that's the first step. So we've got our object model centered. Um, and so now really what we're going to do is start working through our areas and making sure that everything is kind of the way it's supposed to be. Um, I can see here, I didn't create this model, but it has a group. Let's actually look and see what's in the model. So obviously we've got the area C 3/4 and area C full. And then we've got this area A, which actually goes over top of that area B. And then we've got area D and area E, which is our collar. So what we've got left here are the folds. So the folds are um, the interior parts of some of the areas. And you know, this is a great way to do this because you've got like a group of all the interior things together. But we kind of need to separate them out so that um, everything can be joined with the area that it belongs to. Hopefully it makes some sense. Um, so luckily from Marvelous Designer, we have the area has its individual like little materials so that we can grab each of these little things because they have their own material. Okay, so let's separate those pieces and we can break them out, break them up. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is from here, hit tab and you can go into edit mode. So then we can access the individual pieces. And essentially what you want to do is highlight each of the materials, hit select, and then hit P, and you want to separate it by the selection. And then move on to the next one. Select, actually make sure it's deselected. There we go. Okay, so select, separate, selection, select, separate, selection, and select. Okay, so now we have all those individual pieces. I'm going to exit edit mode. Now we can see what we have left here. So I'm not sure if there's anything, doesn't look like there's anything left in the actual like folds. So we're going to delete that. So we have a clasp. I'm going to actually just give these things names so that I know what they are. Let's see, this is the area B fold over. Okay, and this is also the area B fold over, but I'm going to give it the leg line name so that I know I'm not going crazy. Actually, that is area B, right? The top first one. Yep, that should be fine. And then this is, I believe this is area C. Yep, so this is a area C fold over. Okay, so now that we have kind of all of our pieces broken up, you know, we have the entire garment, we're ready to start kind of joining some of these pieces. This is where it gets different. Every leotard, every file, every designer has different preferences. And so these files might look totally different than what I'm using right now. The general idea is we need to join them to, you know, we need to join them together to make one combined area. So let's just focus on area A first because it doesn't have any foldovers. Um, and I just want to make sure. So right now we're looking at just area A, which is perfect. Like it's good to go. There's no extra pieces. There's no, right? Does that go on? I just like to check. Oh, maybe it does. Okay, it looks like that actually, that this might be the area A folder. And but it could be the area B foldover too. This is where it gets tricky. But since area A is on the outside, it would be the one that gets folded over the garment. So you would actually see area A on the inside because it gets folded over and sewn. So we're gonna go with area A. So I take it back. So we're gonna combine this, but we're not gonna do it right this second. So let's do um, that second thing like I was talking about. Let's go ahead and build our interior layer. Um, um, all right. All right, we'll use the numbers. Okay, so normally you would go about building out your A, B, C, D. It doesn't really matter what order you do it in as long as you have all the pieces you need. Since these have like foldovers and that kind of thing, which a lot of them will, I'm going to go ahead and build out our interior layer, uh, and we can even do our exterior layer, the embellishment layer at the same time. We can build those two out, and then that way we'll know where they sit, so we can make sure that the foldover pieces are on the inside. Um, so what we're going to do is right now I'm going to turn off these extra pieces because I don't want them to be confusing or, get in the way. Um, so let's start with the exterior layer. Normally, sometimes the interior and exterior layer are going to be the same, but with this style, we have this area A that has an overlap. It literally goes over top of another piece. Um, so for your exterior layer, you want to include area A. For your interior layer, you don't need it because area B is actually on the inside there. Um, so let's go ahead and build this out. So what I want to do is select area A, B. You're going to have to pick a 3/4 or a full view to do. So for right now, let's just work on the full view. So I turned off the area C, 3/4. Um, so let's select the area C, D, and E. So, all right, we've got everything there. And what you want to do here is you want to duplicate it, but not move it somewhere else. So I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it, and you can see you've got like a ghost of it here. If you hit Escape, it puts it right back where it needs to go, and you've got duplicates of all those parts, which is exactly what we want. So what we want to do is we want to join these into one object. And you can do that by hitting Command J or going to Object and Join. And there we go. Okay, so we've got like this putty colored kind of thing over top of all of our other areas, but it's actually not really over top of it right now. It's occupying the exact same space. Um, which is not really what we want. We want to make sure to push it out a little bit from the outside. And that's just so that if we put something on top of it, like an imprint or something, it doesn't wind up getting lost inside of the actual fabric. Um, so, you want it to sit on top of the fabric, not be inside the fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do is give this its proper name, and we're going to call it the EMB layer. So that's embroidery embellishment layer. So there it is. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply a displace modifier. And of course, it blows it way out. I'm going to set the mid-level to 1, and I'm going to set the strength to 0.0001. Doesn't seem like it actually did anything different, but now you can kind of see that it's not occupying the same layer. And if you can zoom in like ridiculously close here, you can actually see that there's a little bit of a space in between those. It's going to be pretty imperceptible online once it's there, and the customer won't be able to zoom in this far, so that's totally fine. Just to keep in mind that it is actually outside of that. Um, and yeah, so all right. So now that the EMB layer is done, I'm actually just going to turn it off because it's finished. There's nothing more we need to do to it. So let's go ahead and then make the interior layer so we can tackle that. So I'm going to turn off area A because, like I said before, we don't really need it. And I'm going to select B, C, D, E, and once again, same thing. I'm going to duplicate it so we get that, hit escape, and I'm going to control J this time and join them, and it looks exactly pretty much the same as our other thing. Actually, now that I'm noticing this, we probably don't want to do an interior layer of these mesh pieces that are strapped to the outside. It's probably a artistic or like stylized choice. I'm going to delete that object. Just because like when you're looking inside this, you want to be able to see the back of that actual thing and not that black. I know they went black inside everything, but I think that would look strange. So that is area D. So what we're going to do is we're going to select everything but area D. And then we're going to duplicate again and join. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. So this is now going to be your interior layer, INT, in caps. The caps are important. So before we displace it, so displacement works in the direction of the normals. So let's go into edit mode here real quick and take a look at our normals. So as you can see, all the normals are pointing outside, like they're going out into the world. And what we want to do is we want to get them all to point inside. So first thing you want to do is you want to go to select everything. Just hit A or select all. And then go into your mesh, go to your normals, and you want to flip. Now you can see like most of the normals are pointing inside here, and that's exactly what we want. In a couple of areas that look like they were set up with the fold over already built into that part, you can see they're pointing outside, but that's not really a big deal. We're gonna like to, ideally you wanna be able to get it so that everything is pointing inside for this layer, but it's not really going to affect it too awful much. And to change this, we'd have to go back into our model and like fix that, make it a new material, re-import it and kind of start over. So these are something, things we'll actually get better at as we work, I think, a little bit more with these. But it's not really going to affect it, I don't think, too much right here. So the normals are now pointing inside. I'm going to exit edit mode. And now I'm going to add my displace modifier. And now that I added my displace modifier, I can go, let's try 0.1 and see if that works. And so since the normals are pointing inside, it's going in the direction of the normals, so it's going inside when you add a positive value to your displacement modifier there. And you can see that the purple interior object here is actually inside. Doesn't look like we have any errors or like pieces that are popping out anywhere, so I think we are good. If so, like if you would have like a little bit of purple sticking out, like or pieces of the mesh objects that are overlapping, you can just change that strength value. Start incrementing it, just like instead of 1, you can push it up to 2, and so on and so forth. I like to try and keep it as close to the original layer as I possibly can, and that's because of those fold over things, and because, as you saw, it creates gaps between those objects. Customer probably won't see it even if you went up to like 1 or 2, but you just want to keep those gaps as small as possible, just so nobody actually does notice them. Um, so, all right. So now let's go back and kind of backtrack a little bit now that we've got the embroidery layer and the interior layer, and turn on our pieces again. I'm going to leave that embroidery layer off, or yeah, embellishment layer off. So let's take a look and see if we can get those foldovers in the right spot, and so we can join our areas. All right, so let's work with that area A foldover again. We're going to turn off area B, we're going to turn off area C. I know I just turned them back on. We're going to turn off area D and E, because I just want to see what that area A is. Sometimes the random coloring isn't quite different enough here. And if you go to one of the other views, or if you turn it off and turn it back on, no, it's not going to do it for me. Of course not. Well, we can deal with it. So basically, what we're looking at here is area C fold over. Let's turn everything off, like I said I was going to. So I want the interior, the area A fold over, and the area A. So we can see through the neckline here. You can see that area A fold over. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that that whole piece is inside of the interior section. So you can see where it's kind of colliding right here, where you got this, like, sometimes you can see the interior, sometimes you can see the fold over. So we're going to have area A fold over selected, and we're going to displace, and we're going to go to 0.0001 to begin with, and you can see that moved it out a little bit. So let's increase it by another one, and that made it a little bit more. I think if we go to a third one, we'll probably be fine. It looks pretty good. This is where judgment call kind of comes into play, because see, I already went to 4, and we're still, like, there's still a little bit of collision right there. Again, though, a customer is not going to see that level of detail. They're not going to be able to zoom in this far, so I think we're probably okay with that. I don't want to go too far and have it just kind of floating out on its own, especially since it's supposed to look like it's connected to the outside part here. So yeah. So normally I would just leave it like this, but since we're going to join this to another object, it needs to be actually applied. So click the little drop down caret here and click apply. And so basically that just makes that change permanent, that displace permanent for that piece. And so then we can take and select your area A fold over and your area A, and either Command J or Object join, and now they are both part of the same thing. And you can still see, the interior object, you can see the area A fold over, you can see the area A on the outside, and that's exactly what we want. I kind of work through each area at a time, and I rename them, like, to the completed thing, and now it changes the color, of course. I rename it to the completed section when I'm finished with it. So then that way I know it's finished. So area A is finished. So let's move on and do area B. So you basically just want to do the same thing here. Area B leg line. Area B leg line looks pretty good already. I can see it clearly from pretty much all the angles I'm getting. So let's just go ahead and join area B and area B leg line. Control J, rename that to area B. There we go. Okay, so area C has a foldover. And let's see if I can get a good view of it here. Turn it on. And it's inside, it's this inside, right inside the sleeves here. You can see it's kind of colliding a little bit. Let's actually get in there. Yep, that's area A, and so that's the area C foldover. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and displace that. And again, I know sometimes the displacement doesn't work as expected. I will say this, whoever set up this file made sure that their foldover pieces were already flipped as far as the normals go. So that's great. So if you would go into edit mode, you can see all those normals are pointing inward. And so that's why when I change the strength of the displacement, it's moving in towards the body. If you would have a foldover piece or a piece that you need to move inside and it keeps going outside, check your normal direction. Because like I said, the displacement always goes in the direction of the normal. If you would have something that you want to be able to see from the outside, but it has to move inside of another piece of fabric, like a liner, what you would need to do is in the strength modifier here, you don't want to flip the normals of that because you want the view to be pointed outward so you can see that liner from outside, instead of inside. But you would actually put in a negative number in the strength here. So instead of 0.0001, you would actually have negative 0.001, and that will move it in the opposite direction. So hopefully that clarifies any kind of confusion with the displacement and the normals, because I know it does get a little hairy at times. This is being kind of stubborn. All right, we're already up to 5. Honestly, I think that's okay. We can go to 7. Like I said, you could probably go all the way up to 0.001. Yeah, yeah, and you really wouldn't notice. But like I said, you just want to keep it as close as you possibly can, just so that there's no, weirdness when you export the model. I think that's probably fine. It's just a slight visual to see that it does fold over there, so it's not super important, and it's in the inside of the arm. Again, not super important, so it's probably fine at 0.001. But we have area C and area C full sleeve. So right now we're working on a full sleeve because we have the full sleeve interior. Um, so you would need to make a separate interior because it has the sleeves on it for the 3/4 version. So you would need to repeat that process at that time to make a 3/4 version. And I didn't do that, so I'm going to have to kind of backtrack at some point and make those objects again, or like cut it out of the existing interior, that kind of thing. Um, it's tough sometimes when you're doing this to like get everything the first time around. I try to save at different points so that if I need to go back to something, I can. Um, we can always import those pieces again and kind of work through it. But once you get to this point, you have to just take what you got. So I could redo the whole thing because it's actually pretty quick once you get into it to get to 3/4. one. But for right now, let's just continue focusing on the full sleeve. Um, so, if you've got one fold over, you may have to copy it to do the 3/4 if you do everything else correctly there. So let's go ahead and actually we could copy this and then redo the 3/4, take the full sleeve out of the int and then put the see what I mean? Like there's more than 100 ways to do some of this stuff. But again, let's just concentrate on building the full sleeve for this version. So we're going to take the area C fold over and the area C full, and we're going to join those. So now you have your full area C, and it changes the color there. So we should be, and there you go. You can see what happened. So when I joined them, it completely lost our displacement. So I'm going to undo a couple of layers, a couple of steps here. Okay, so now we get our foldover back. And that is because I did not apply the displacement, like I said before in the last one. So you have to apply the displacement before you join them. Otherwise, it will just lose your changes there. And that's annoying. So, all right, so now we've got area C built out. So you've got A, B, and C. We're going to ignore D, area C 3/4 for right now. Actually, we're just going to take it out of this file because we're not going to be able to build that one from what we have here. Good thing this is just an example. So let's work on area D. Area D is that mesh piece in the back, and it actually looks like it's good to go as is. There's no foldovers, no other things we need to do to it. So we're just going to rename it. And area E as our collar piece. So as of right now, I don't know what we're going to do with the class, whether I'm going to make it a separate thing like the EMB and INT for the program to handle, or if we're just going to color it using the UV map. So it doesn't have a separate piece as of right now. So in order to make it work, let's just add it into area E to make sure it's all one piece, and then we'll make sure it gets added to the UV map as well. So I'm going to select the clasp and then select area E and join those together and rename it, and they're now all one piece. So there you have it. As you remember from the example version, you got the A, B, C, D, E all your lettered areas. You got your EMB, your embroidery layer that's over top of all of that. You got your interior layer that's inside there that you can now see as you turn it on and off. And at this point, let me just double check the list of things we're doing here. Interior object, embellishment object. So the final steps. So this is your point to check where, like if there's anything in here you don't need, you can kind of clean it up right now. The exporter does give you options to kind of select what you want and what you don't want, which is kind of nice. So if you had like the 3/4 pieces in here and it's just a quick turn off this, turn on that, you could do that. Just keep in mind that, like, say we would have a C 3/4 and a C full sleeve. You're actually going to make sure you have to rename them so that whatever you're exporting only has the letter. So if we had a C 3/4, we would have to rename our regular C to like C full and then rename the 3/4 to just C kind of deal. Again, not the end of the world. There is a couple different ways you can also, I don't know if you put these in a different collection. If you can have this, I don't think you can. I think objects have to have different names even in different collections. So I think you still have to do the renaming thing, but it's not the end of the world if you want to keep everything in one file, especially if you've got something like this where the 3/4 sleeve and the full sleeve are pretty much the same, except for the length of this actual sleeve. So yeah, so let's see, what else? Uh, Save your full UV information. Okay, so let's talk about the UVs really quick here before we get to exporting. In your UV editing window, normally what happens here is you've got something and you've got it on your UV map, which is over here. And it works just fine. If you hit tab to exit edit mode, and you can actually select all of your things, and you can see where they're laid out on your UV map. And this is great. Everything is separated. It's got its own spot. Everything is good to go. So this should be essentially good to go, with one exception. um, First of all, the fold over pieces, it looks like, are overlapping the um, the non-fold over pieces. So if we're talking about like a cuff or like those interior leg lines, it looks like maybe they're actually separated there, the leg lines. But if it's just a color, like if it's not getting sublimation art, that's fine. If it is getting sublimation art, it's probably fine too, just for like a small like overlapping area, that's probably okay. Where we might run into issues here, though, is one, we added in the clasp. Why didn't I get everything? There we go. Now I have everything. We added in the clasp, and I see the clasp box down here, but it's overlapping a leg line, and that's not going to be so good. So, and also your interior texture. Your interior texture has to be off on its own. Otherwise, your interior texture is going to be the same as your exterior texture, and it's not going to do its job. So let's go ahead and fix those. I don't always use this, but it's a kind of a nice feature, and I'll show it to you. Up here in the corner of the UV menu, UV, like the top bar, there's this UV sync selection. Click that, and basically what it does is it syncs the window on the left with the window on the right. So now everything that's selected on the left is selected on the right. It's actually really a great tool for moving things around. If you unclick and like kind of deselect everything, it gives you the ability to select like a specific thing, either here or in the other window, and move it around. So like for the clasp, and maybe I should have done this before I joined it. That's an option too. But let's go ahead here and grab all these clasp UVs and move them. So the L key gives you anything that is linked. So if you hit that a few times while moving your mouse around in the area here, it should be able to grab. So anything that's linked is, UVs that are connected. It's a great way to select things, because otherwise you might wind up losing things that are either in foreground or behind it or whatever. So I think I have all of them selected. I'm gonna hit G, and I'm gonna move those like up here into a nice clean spot with nothing else there. It looks like I got them all. So then I'm gonna uncheck that, and those are now on their own, good to go. So no worries there. So really the biggest thing I have now is the interior layer. To move the interior layer, it doesn't need to be very big, because it's all getting colored one color, and it's black. So it can literally be just a few pixels wide. But it is tricky because you have to select the interior layer. Sometimes you can do it by getting L, but like you can see, I'm not really getting the sleeves. So if I do that, you kind of get all the pieces, but did you really get all the pieces? It's one of those, like, I'm not really sure what I'm selecting here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just, now that I have everything, so with everything selected, I can look at my UV map and find a good spot for this to go. So I'm looking, and the grid's over here. So I'm going to say this fourth box on the top is a great spot for my interior layer to go because there's nothing there. So that's where we're going to put it. I make that note because as soon as I go into select mode on the right here, and then select my interior layer, when I go back into edit mode so I can make the correct selections, now you can see I can't see everything else. So I don't know where all the other UVs are, and that makes it kind of difficult. But now I know I can put them all in this fourth box up here in the UV map, and I can not worry that they're running into something else. So I'm going to hit S and scale it down so that it fits inside the box, or mostly inside the box. I'm going to move it up here, and it doesn't have to be the box, like it, it's just I'm using these to kind of use as like visual reference points as to where all this stuff should go. All right, so I'm going to exit and reselect all my stuff just to double check everything. And as you can see, with everything selected, we are good to go. Everything's in its own spot. There's no overlaps. No, the EMB, the embellishment layer, you want that to overlap because that's where you're gonna put your jewels, and you want that to relate to your body pieces and work the same way it has in the past. So that's fine. Your interior layer, you want in its own spot. And for right now, we wanted that clasp in its own spot too. So we are good to go here. The last thing I'm going to do is just for reference, I'm going to export the UV layout. If you go to the UV and select everything you possibly can over here in your thing and make sure it's all highlighted, and go to export UVs. And okay, we're in my folder, and I'm going to just give it a name. So this is 493S, and we're going to call that full sleeve UV. I like to have my UVs the same size as my actual artwork, so I'm going to put it in 2048 and 2048. You can pick other things up here, but PNG seems to work best when you pull it into Illustrator. So you can also check this all UVs if you have only this file, this style in here. If you do all UVs and you have your 3/4 stuff like in there as well, it's going to pull that in too. So I'm going to leave that unchecked for right now, but because it'll still get. Will it get everything? I didn't select anything, so of course. Here, let me cancel this, select everything, and then go to UV, export UV layout, just to be on the safe side. Okay. Of course, I have to set my size again. 2048, 2048. Okay, so now we're good to go. We can export the UV layout. It's going to save that image in our folder, so we'll have it for reference for later on. And now we can go to exporting a model. Okay, so on to the final step here. We're going to export a model to a format called GLB. GLB is a specific file type in the GLTF format, if you really want to know, that we're going to use for the web. Basically, it takes all this stuff and shrinks it down into one model that Liquid Pixels can use, and the JavaScript code can use, and it can like kind of access pieces in and out of there. Couple of cleanup items if you really want, like you can go through these individual pieces and you can remove any of the materials. You don't have to do that. Sometimes it's nice to have them like in the file if you want to be able to pull something or select something later. you have the option in the, what is this, object data properties, you can make vertex groups. So say you wanted to make sure you always had access to this B front, that selection. You could go in, you can select that, and you can go into your vertex groups here, and you can make a new group. You can name it whatever you want. You can click assign. You can even lock it down so that it can't change. And then you can literally select, deselect, and these stay in here even if you get rid of this material. So let's say I wipe out all these materials, but I'm like, oh, I needed to select that again. You can go into your edit mode, highlight your new group, and select. So just to keep that in mind, if that's something you want, or I like to just clean up everything at the end, but it just kind of depends on the way you work. Also, something else I discovered here, you can see that, like, if I'm in the materials window here and I click, you know, and I click to a different area, it takes me to like different parts of this menu. I found out that if you click the little caret here and it's the sync with outliner, if you say never, if you're in the materials window and you click to other things, it always keeps you in the materials window, which is really nice. I don't know why it's not set up that way all the time, but I set mine that way. And again, if you set it that way and then save your default startup file, it will always be that way. So that's just a little tidbit there. I'm going to get rid of the rest of these materials. Like I said, you don't have to do this because we're going to tell it not to export the materials anyway. So this is kind of like an extra unneeded step, but it's something I do before I do a final save of what I'm gonna. I save the Blender file like this, and I'm gonna do that now. And then I also save the exported file. So, all right, let's export this thing. All right, so to export, what we want to do is go to File and Export, and right down here is GLTF 2.0, GLB, GLTF. That's what we want. And it's going to pull up the export window. So, just like exporting anything else, you want to give it a file name. For our liquid pixels, our standards are the style, and then full or 3Q, for full or 3/4 sleeve. We're going to basically export a separate model for each of those options, and that's it. Like we're not doing 100 exports. We're not just 2 for each style, and I think that's amazing. So let's look at the export window. All of our stuff here is on the side. We don't normally mess with anything when we export, but this time we're going to actually have to. You're going to want to make sure GLTF binary is selected. That's the format we want to make sure that Liquid Pixels sends it right. It won't send any of the other file names, only the GLB. So we want to make sure we're using that one. There's this remember export settings, which is great. That means that every time, but it's only file specific. So every time you open this particular Blender file, it will remember your export settings. I believe you can go up here and you can set presets that will carry over to other Blender files. But yeah, that's just so you know that ahead of time. It's nice to check that because then that way I don't have to keep setting these options every time I go in here. Okay, so what we want to include. This is where it depends on how you set up your model. I could say selected objects, but I only have one object selected right now, and that's the interior layer. So that's not really going to work for me. Visible objects, everything is visible, so I think that's fine. Renderable objects, you can do visible and renderable and selected, and so on and so forth. You can do an active collection, the active scene, so you can render out everything, like just by doing that. If you save out your things in collections, so say you made one collection, your full sleeve, and another collection, your 3/4 sleeve, you could do that, and then you could make sure to make that collection active by turning it on or turning it off, that kind of thing. But you could do it that way. Just make sure that whatever, if you wind up with nothing in your file, this is where I go to first to make sure that what I selected is getting what it needs to get. Um, I'm just going to stick with my default, which is visible and renderable objects. Um, and that's what I'm going to leave it at. So uh, transform menu has this plus Y up. You want to keep that on. That's just to make sure that when we export it, your model is in the right direction. Um, geometry. So there's a couple of things in the geometry menu. The first is mesh, and the first thing you want to do is apply modifiers. So for anything that we didn't apply, remember when we put the displacement modifiers on the EMB and the INT, and for anything we didn't apply, it will apply it before it saves it, which means those changes will be permanently saved in the export, which is exactly what we want. Everything else you can leave totally fine. Or as it is by default. Material, we actually don't need any materials. We're going to set up our materials in the code and from liquid pixels. So there's no point in exporting them. It just makes our file bigger. So just say no export, and that's it. um, that's all we really need there. But we have two more things to kind of go through here. Compression, we definitely want compression. Some of these files are large. We're adding extra layers with the embellishment and the interior layers. So they're complex models, some more than others. And this will shrink down that file size without losing any of our actual visuals, which is nice. Um, this is huge as far as file sizes go. I've seen some of these models after I've finished constructing them be like megabytes, like 30, 40, 50 megabytes, which is way too big to download on the internet. Compression will take it down almost in every circumstance I've used so far, down to under 3 megabytes. Sometimes even if it'll just make it a few K. And so the compression is really, really valuable here. So make sure that's turned on. And lastly, animation. We're not doing any kind of animation. So we don't need it. So again, we can turn off those options and we don't have to export anything we don't need. All right, so we've got all that set. Um, like I said, you can save a preset by pushing the plus here. I'm not sure if that carries over to other, I think it does. I think if you save a preset here, it saves it inside Blender, not inside the file. So when you go to export your next file, you can just select your preset and it will, change all your options, which is really nice. So do that if you want. And then you got your file name and we're going to go to export. Just takes a few seconds. It's actually really pretty quick. And I'm going to quick save my Blender file one last time. And that's it. So we've got our model is, excuse me, our model is exported, at least the full sleeve version. I would have to go back in here and make those changes to get your 3/4 sleeve version and save that out in the same way. But yeah, that's done. So now you can see we've got our 4938S full GLB and it is 611 kilobytes. The file is really small. Um, you can't preview it using a Mac, which is unfortunate, at least not yet. There is a website though, um, obviously, when everything is done, you can get it to here, on the GK viewer, so that you can preview your thing. But if you go to Google and type in GLTF viewer, I will put the link to this in the doobly-doo down below. There's this viewer. So if you take your file and you drag it into this window, you can see exactly what you exported, which is really nice. Um, So yeah, you can see this is a great way to test to see to make sure you got like all your pieces in there. Obviously, you can't really like click through the layers and stuff like the custom one that we did. But you can kind of see, you can change a couple of different things. You can color the background, you can color your leotard, and you can, play with all this kind of crazy stuff. You can change the background color so it's easier to see. Um, you can turn on wireframe and you can see kind of through your model to make sure that everything is how you want it. So it gives you a bunch of really good options that you can kind of play around with, just to kind of give it a test. Sometimes I do this just to make sure everything's working, make sure everything's actually in the file because, sometimes things get left behind. Um, Keep in mind here, you're also viewing the EMB layer over top of the regular layer over top of your interior layer. Um, our configurator and our viewer does different things with all of that, and I can show you when when we get it all up there, that it does a bunch of different things that you can turn on and off layers and whatnot. But just keep in mind, if it looks a little strange, it may be because you're looking at all of those things together. Um, So, uh, the thing we need to talk about here next is getting your model up to Liquid Pixel. Um, in the special order guide, I've laid out, I think, what are all of the files and folders that you would need to get those up and running. Um, you got your models, which we just made, the 4938 full, 4938 uh, 3/4, and that in Liquid Pixels in the art, it just goes in a models folder. There's not a folder for um, gym versus swim versus this or that. It's all kind of in the same boat. And if we move on to other areas, we may have to break that up a little bit, but we don't need to worry about that right now. Jewels are pretty much the same as they were before. You want to set those up on your UV map. Just export them as PNG. I wish Illustrator would export as WebP, but it doesn't yet. So you have to export them as PNG files and then convert them to WebP, and they go in that Art 3D Elite Jewels underneath that style. So there'll be a Jewels 4938S, and then you can put your J14, 250, the 250-3/4, all that stuff still works the same as it did before. Um, Grid files, same as before, in your data table for that curved on the leg line. Um, the So there's really just two sections here that we use to build out our colors. The first thing is the artwork, and the artwork is pretty much set up the exact same way it was before. You saw we exported the UV map, which you can use to set up your artwork, um, along with any kind of sublimation art and all those things. That all that works the exact same way. So you're going to need your texture plates, the A, B, C, D, those things. The sublimation plates, RSTV, um, your logos, if it gets a sublimated logo or embroidered logo or a jeweled logo. Um, I didn't include that here, and Ali called me out on it, so thank you for that. I'll have to add that on my next version of this. So the jeweled logo does go in the design area. Um, the These are new though. You actually need that normal file, that crazy, you know, purple file from Marvelous Designer. And you want to make sure you have all of your pieces laid out the same way as your UV map. Um, this is one of those reasons I like to set up my UV map inside Marvelous Designer first because it exports that way. Now, this won't have the information for the interior, but the interior doesn't need a normal map because it's just black. And it won't have the information for the clasp because I moved it. Um, but it will have all of the information for everything else that's in there. Um, and so for that reason, you want to make sure you kind of lay out your UV maps appropriately inside Marvelous Designer first. Um, I mean, we can change things here, but then you're going to have to go back into Marvelous Designer and change it in order to export the normal, and it makes it kind of insane. So it's just easier to do it when you create the original style. But both of those need to be saved as a PNG file inside that design area too. And that'll just make sure that everything kind of works the same way that we're used to seeing it. Um, the other new thing is masks. So um, we have to set up masks in order to cut out the textures. So say you've got an area A, like we do with a mesh texture. It's basically going to pull a mesh texture and it's going to put it on a plate for the 3D software to read. But we don't want everything to be mesh, just area A. So it's going to literally use these masks as like a cookie cutter to cut that texture out. So masks are really easy to make. Essentially, they are the exact same as your color plates. You just need to use black instead of the 80-80-80 gray. Um, and you don't need them for sublimated areas. So, in this case, A, B, C, and D, and E, is there an E? Yeah, A, B, C, D, and E would need a mask. And it's literally just the same as the texture plate, just colored black and white. Um, and you want a white background instead of a transparent background and saved as WebP. Um, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but no, that should be it. So they're the same as the color plates, and they'll do their job. Um, I may make a second video to go along with this, which kind of walks you through getting all of it onto the configurator. But for right now, I feel like it's just important to get the models kind of built and get you through this process first. Um, so the final piece is setting up the data table, um, which is pretty much the same thing we've always done, um, with one exception, and that's this first part. So the bottom half, even though it doesn't quite work yet because I haven't written that piece of the code, that is the same as we kind of normally we're used to seeing it. This top half, however, is a little different. We got uh, two areas. So we have the fabric areas and the color areas, and then the number of fabric areas and the number of color areas. And you're like, well, isn't that the same thing? It's a little different. So when we talk about fabric areas, we're talking about areas that get a fabric applied to them. So, if you're looking at your price guide, they're going to be your A, B, C, D, E's, one, two, threes, and a liner also, just to keep that in mind. Um, so they're going to be areas that get fabric applied to them. The colorable areas are areas that get color from your UV map. So think about a sublimated design. You may have one area that gets fabric, area A. So in which case, your number of fabric areas would be 1, your fabric area would be A. And there's a tab in between each of these, just for an FYI. Um, the number of color areas, though, so say you've got 5 different sublimation colors that go on area A, you're going to need to have um, area A and then P, Q, R, S, and T, or so on and so forth. You're going to need to have all those areas listed so that it goes through and makes the artwork for those. So, those have to be kind of spelled out differently here, just so that it knows. Basically, what it's doing is it's going through the fabric areas and putting the texture on if it needs it, and then it's going through the color areas and applying the color if it needs it. Um, so, these it gives us a little bit more flexibility in how we build these out. Just if you have any questions, just ask. I can walk you through that too. um, the Elite 3D Viewer is up there, and I think it is a permanent location now, or at least semi-permanent. You can use this link that's in there, and it does work. I don't think it expires anymore. Once everything's up there, you can kind of use this to test using your regular things. I am working on a quote unquote visualizer just for us to be able to change options to build out all these parameters so we don't have to go through the whole process of typing out all these crazy parameters in order to just view a garment. Um, so hopefully that should be ready soon. And, and what else? And then the last bit of this is the required parameters for the particular 3D viewer, um, which are updated slightly. There's a couple different changes. One, we don't need the AO combinations anymore, which is great. You can just, you want to make sure you include all the options for all the AO combinations, just in case. But um, we should be able to do everything we need without those. I'm trying to think here. And just there's a few other changes, but for the most part, it's the same as it always was. Um, and I believe that's it. Like I said, I may make another video if we need it on how to like get all of these individual pieces onto Liquid Pixel, but I feel like at this point you guys are pretty adept at the color plates and creating those and that kind of that area of it. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And I promise I won't bite your head off because this is complicated. So, um, but like I said, have any questions, ask, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks.